My father used to say that you can tell everything about a man by his kitchen and his promises. For 5 years, I believed Jake's promises were as solid as the oak table in our London flat. But it turns out, while I was across the world keeping our forever on life support, he was busy letting another woman label his spice jars. He thought he could have it all: the promotion of a lifetime in Melbourne, and a loyal girlfriend waiting in the wings while he played house with someone else. He didn't realize that while he was distracted by his office buddies, I was busy becoming his boss. When he begged me to stay, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked him in the eye and told him the truth. I don't need a man who treats love like a side hustle. I need a career that rewards my worth. I'm moving to Melbourne next week, not as his girlfriend, but as his director. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize you were the only one keeping the relationship alive? Drop a comment. I want to know I'm not alone in this. 5 years is a long time to build a life on a foundation of someday. In the beginning, Jake and I were the couple everyone envied, the kind that shared a single pair of headphones on the tube and finished each other's sentences. We met at a rainy bus stop in Shoreditch. I was struggling with a broken umbrella, and he was laughing at me, offering half of his dry space. He was messy, chaotic, and brilliant. His first apartment was a disaster zone of half-finished projects and a literal brown moving box that served as a coffee table for 3 years. I loved that box. It represented the now. It represented the fact that we were building something from scratch. When the Melbourne opportunity came up, it was supposed to be a 6-month sprint. A get in, get the experience, and get back home kind of deal. We sat on that cardboard box, drinking cheap Prosecco, and made a pact. We'd survive the distance because what we had was real. But the reality of a 10,000-mile gap is less like a romantic movie and more like a slow, agonizing war of attrition. London is gray on the best of days, but without Jake, it felt like the color had been drained out of the city entirely. My life became a cycle of 7 a.m. alarms and 8 p.m. Skype calls. I lived for that little green online dot. I'd be sitting in my office at Canary Wharf, the London rain blurring the window, while he was waking up to the Australian sun. "I miss you, Squeak," he'd say, his hair messy from sleep. And I'd feel that physical ache in my chest, the one that makes you feel like you're breathing through a straw. I was working 20-hour days, not just because I'm ambitious, though I am, but because the silence in our flat was too loud. Every time I walked past the spot where his sneakers used to be, I felt a pang of loneliness that made my eyes sting. I threw myself into the London branding scene, taking on every grueling project the firm had, hoping that if I just worked hard enough, the 6 months would fly by. I was the one sending the care packages. I spent a fortune on shipping British chocolate and his favorite brand of tea, just so he'd have a piece of home. I'd include little notes tucked into the folds of his old hoodies, smelling of my perfume, hoping he'd hold them at night. In my head, we were a team. I was the anchor in London, holding down our history, while he was the scout in Melbourne, building our future. He'd talk about the managing director role like it was a holy grail. "Once I get this, Liz, everything changes. We'll be set. You can move out here, we'll get a place on the coast, and we'll never have to say goodbye at an airport again." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He never missed a call. Bang on 8 p.m., my phone would jump to life. We had this ritual, this digital tether that kept me sane. Even when he started looking tired, or when our conversations felt a little more hurried, I told myself it was just the stress of the new job. I told myself that the distance was making me paranoid. I remember one night, about 4 months in, I was feeling particularly low. I'd had a rough day at the firm, the kind where a client tears your soul apart over a font choice, and I just wanted to hear his voice. When he answered, I saw a flicker of movement behind him, a shadow crossing the hallway of his apartment. "Is someone there?" I asked, my heart doing a weird little skip. "Just the wind, babe," he'd laughed, rubbing his eyes. "The windows in this place are old. Everything rattles." I chose to believe him. I chose to believe in the wind because the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. I leaned into the work even harder. If he was stressed, I would be his support. If he was building a life, I would be the one ready to join it. I didn't realize that while I was pouring my soul into a long-distance ghost, the man I loved was being replaced by a stranger. A stranger who didn't want my care packages or my perfume-scented hoodies. A stranger who was learning to love avocados and organic grains in a kitchen I hadn't even seen yet. I was the squeak from his old life, a memory he kept on a 7 a.m. schedule, while he was building a masterpiece with someone else. The 26-hour flight from Heathrow to Melbourne feels like a fever dream when you're fueled by nothing but adrenaline and the scent of a stale airplane blanket. By the time I hit the arrivals gate, my skin felt like parchment and my eyes were burning. But none of it mattered. I was looking for him. And then I saw it. A giant, neon-bright banner that screamed, "Welcome to Melbourne, Squeak!" Jake was holding it, leaning against a pillar with that lopsided grin that had been the background of my phone for half a decade. He looked different. Tanned, fit, wearing a linen shirt that looked far too expensive for the man who used to live in threadbare band tees. I dropped my suitcase right there in the middle of the terminal and practically flew at him. When he caught me, the world finally stopped spinning. I buried my face in his neck, waiting for that familiar scent of cedarwood and Old Spice, but he smelled like expensive citrus and something clinical, like a high-end department store. "I can't believe it," I muffled against his shoulder, my voice thick. "I'm actually here." "I missed you, Liz," he whispered, but his grip felt tight. Not the "I'm never letting you go" tight I'd imagined, but more like he was bracing himself for a collision. As we walked to the parking garage, I kept stealing glances at him. He was talking, fast, chaotic, telling me about the surf at St. Kilda and the coffee culture, but he wasn't looking at me, not really. He was looking at the path ahead, his fingers twitching against the steering wheel. "Where are you parked?" I asked, needing the quiet of a car, needing to be alone so I could finally kiss him properly. The drive to his apartment was a blur of palm trees and sunshine that felt too bright for my London gray soul. I was babbling about the firm, about how my boss was distraught to lose me for 2 weeks, but Jake was nodding at all the wrong times. "Wait until you see the place," he said, pulling into a sleek underground garage. "I really leveled up, Liz. No more cardboard boxes." He wasn't kidding. When he opened the door to his apartment, I stopped dead in the entryway. My brain couldn't process the image. This wasn't a bachelor pad. It was a spread from an interior design magazine. There was a velvet sofa the color of midnight. There were floating shelves perfectly curated with brass trinkets and succulents that looked suspiciously healthy. And there, in the center of the room, was a solid marble coffee table. "Wow," I whispered. The word felt small in the pristine space. "Yeah," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, watching me with a strange, guarded expression. "I thought I'd change things up, grow up a bit, put things away." I walked over to a shelf, running my finger along a small ceramic bird. It was beautiful. It was also something I would never, in a million years, buy. And I knew Jake wouldn't either. "It's immaculate, Jake. It's lovely." I turned to him, trying to force a smile. "But where's the mess? Where's the guy who can't find his keys because they're buried under 3 days of mail?" "He's gone, Liz. Melbourne changed me." He kissed my forehead, a quick, dry peck, and headed toward the kitchen. The apartment was warm. It was homey. But as I stood there in my travel-worn clothes, I realized the warmth wasn't for me. It felt like I had accidentally walked onto a stage set 5 minutes before the lead actress was supposed to arrive. And the lead actress definitely wasn't Squeak. The jet lag was a heavy fog in my brain, but my heart was doing a frantic, jagged dance. I needed to do something normal, something that felt like us. "I'm making you a roast dinner tonight," I said, watching Jake unpack the groceries we'd grabbed on the way from the airport. Trimmings, gravy, the whole bit, just like Sundays back in London. Jake's face lit up, that genuine, hungry look I recognized. For a second, the stranger in the linen shirt vanished. "God, Liz, yes! I've been living on protein shakes and takeout. A roast sounds like heaven." He practically shoved the bags into my arms. "Make yourself at home. My kitchen is your kitchen. I'm going to jump in the shower and wash the beach off me." I smiled, watching him disappear down the hallway. This was it. This was how I'd reclaim him. Through the smell of rosemary and the familiar rhythm of peeling potatoes. But as the bathroom door clicked shut and the steam started to hiss, I turned to the kitchen, and the air in the room suddenly felt very, very thin. I reached for the drawer next to the sink, expecting the usual chaotic jumble of dull knives and takeout menus. Instead, it slid open with a silent, oiled grace. Inside, everything was partitioned, labeled. There were sandwich bags categorized by size. There were silicone lids arranged by diameter. I frowned. Jake once used a rubber band and a piece of tinfoil to seal a bowl of soup. He didn't do diameters. I moved to the cupboard where the roasting tray should be. I pulled it open and froze. No trays. Instead, rows of glass jars filled with specific organic grains: quinoa, amaranth, chia seeds. Each jar had a small handwritten label in elegant, loopy cursive. Quinoa. Soak 15 minutes. Jakey's morning oats. Jakey. The name sat on my tongue like a piece of spoiled fruit. Nobody called him Jakey. He'd told me in our first year of dating that his mother used to call him that to embarrass him, and he'd made it a blood oath that I would never, ever use it. I felt a cold prickle start at the base of my neck and crawl up my scalp. I began opening doors, faster now. The pantry was a masterpiece of neurotic organization. Everything was grouped by color and vibe. There were teas I'd never heard of, herbal blends for mental clarity and hormonal balance. In the fridge, tucked behind the milk, was a small container of almond butter with a Post-it note. "Save some for me, kiss." The handwriting matched the jars. I stood in the center of the kitchen, a potato peeler in my hand that I'd finally found in a drawer labeled Utensils, Prep. I felt like a trespasser. This wasn't a man growing up. This was a man being curated. The roast was a disaster in my mind, even if the meat was browning perfectly in the oven an hour later. The kitchen didn't want me there. Every time I reached for a salt shaker or a wooden spoon, I felt the invisible hand of the woman who actually lived here. The woman who knew exactly which burner clicked on the first try and which drawer stuck in the humidity. When Jake finally emerged, smelling of expensive soap and looking refreshed, he found me sitting at the marble island, a glass of water in my shaking hands. "Smells amazing, babe," he said, leaning over to sniff the air. He went to the prep drawer, grabbed 2 forks with practiced ease, and set them on the table. He didn't even have to look. He knew exactly where they were. "Everything good?" he asked, noticing my silence. He popped a roasted potato into his mouth, wincing at the heat. "Your kitchen is interesting," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "I guess your office buddies helped you organize it when you moved in?" Jake's chewing slowed. He didn't look at me. "Yeah, you know how it is. Moving is a bitch. People pitched in." "That was nice of them," I muttered, my eyes fixed on the Jakey's Morning Oats jar sitting on the counter. Surprising to see a real coffee table, too. And the ceramic birds. And the organic amaranth. "Ha!" He forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You always hated my box aesthetic, Liz. I thought I should probably grow up a bit. Show the firm I'm serious about the managing director role. Can't bring the CEO back to a flat with cardboard furniture, right?" Is that what this is? Growing up? I leaned forward, the cold clarity finally beginning to settle over me. Or did you just move someone else in, Jake? A look of pure, unadulterated guilt flashed across his eyes. It was quick, a flicker, but it was there. He dropped his fork, the metal clanging against the plate like a gunshot in the silent room. "Liz, don't be like that. You're jet-lagged. You're overthinking things." We ate the rest of the meal in a silence so heavy I could feel it in my lungs. The symphony of forks hitting plates sounded like a countdown clock. Every bite of the roast I'd worked so hard on tasted like ash. I wasn't just 10,000 miles from home. I was sitting across from a man who had already buried me and replaced the headstone with a marble coffee table. But as I watched him avoid my gaze, I realized something. He was a coward. He was waiting for me to find out, so he didn't have to tell me. He wanted me to be the crazy, jealous girlfriend, so he could justify what he'd done. I took a slow sip of my water and felt a different kind of fire start to burn. He thought he was playing me. He thought he was the one in control because he had the fancy apartment and the big promotion on the horizon. He had no idea that I hadn't just come to Melbourne to see him. I'd come to see my future. And it didn't involve being a guest in a kitchen labeled by another woman. At this point, would you have walked away or kept going to find the truth? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious how many of you would have packed your bags right then. The next morning, the sun was too bright. It was that aggressive Australian sun that shows you every crack in the pavement and every lie in a man's eyes. "Before you get too settled," Jake said, avoiding the tension from the night before by busying himself with a high-end espresso machine I'd never seen him use, "you have to meet the crew. Brunch at Daisy Brew. Dave, Zara, and Ryan are dying to see the woman I've been talking about for 5 years. I watched him. He was performing. The way he adjusted his collar in the mirror, the way he checked his watch, it was all a mask. Zara? I asked, testing the name. Yeah, Zara. She's the lead on the creative side at the firm. Total firecracker. You'll love her. I doubt it, I thought, but I just nodded. Sounds good, babe. Daisy Brew was one of those cafes that felt like a greenhouse. Lots of hanging plants, reclaimed wood, and people wearing linen without a single wrinkle. As we approached a corner table, a woman in forest green dungarees and a crisp white t-shirt stood up. She had that effortless, I eat organic and never get stressed glow. Before I could even offer a hand, she swept me up in a bear hug that smelled like lavender and expensive almond milk. You must be Liz! Oh my God, hi! I'm Zara. Jakey won't stop talking about you. The name Jakey hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Jake. He was staring at the menu like it contained the secrets of the universe, his face flushing a deep, guilty red. Jakey? I said, my voice low and dangerous. Zara laughed, sliding back into her seat and tucking a stray hair behind her ear. Oh, I know. He told me he hates it, but it just fits him so well, doesn't it? He's such a Jakey. We sat down and the conversation flowed around me like a river I was drowning in. Dave and Ryan were perfectly nice, talking about the massive expansion the firm was planning, but my eyes were locked on Zara. She was the kitchen. She reached over and adjusted Jake's cutlery when the waiter brought the water. She knew he liked his lemon on the side. When the food arrived, she pointed at a plate of smashed avocado and poached eggs. Oh, you have to try the avocado toast, Liz. Jakey absolutely loves it now. I finally convinced him that sourdough is better than white bread. I looked at the green mash on Jake's plate. For 5 years, I had tried to get this man to eat a vegetable that wasn't a potato. He had told me avocados were slimy green mush. Now, he was digging in like it was his last meal. 5 years, I said, the words cutting through the table chatter like a blade. The table went silent. 5 years, and I couldn't convince you to even touch an avocado, Jake. 6 months here and you're a fan. Is it the fruit, or is it the company? Jake swallowed a mouthful of toast so loudly I could hear it. He looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. Zara's smile wavered, a flicker of confusion, or perhaps realization, crossing her face. Liz, don't make a scene, Jake hissed under his breath. I'm not making a scene, Jakey, I said, leaning back. I turned to Zara, taking in the dungarees, the handwriting I knew was on her notepad, the way she naturally took up space in his orbit. I'm just admiring the organization. The labels in the pantry, the ceramic birds on the shelves. That was you, wasn't it, Zara? Zara looked between us, her face turning a pale shade of pink. I just wanted to help him settle in. He was so lost when he first got here, and since we worked together so closely... So closely that you moved your breakfast grains into his cupboard? I asked. Liz, that's enough. Jake stood up, tossing his napkin onto the table. We're leaving. The walk back to the apartment was a war zone of silence. I walked 10 paces ahead of him, my heels clicking against the pavement with the precision of a firing squad. My mind was spinning, but for the first time in months, the fog of London was gone. I wasn't sad. I was incandescent. The betrayal was complete. He hadn't just cheated. He had let another woman rewrite the DNA of our life together. He had kept me in a digital box in London, a ghost he called at 8 p.m., while he lived a technicolor life with a woman who knew his coffee order better than I did. We reached the apartment, the stage set, and he slammed the door behind us. "What the hell was that, Melissa? You humiliated me in front of my colleagues, in front of my friends." "Colleagues?" I turned, dropping my bag on the marble table. "Is that what we're calling the woman who sleeps in my spot? Because let's be real, Jake, you didn't just change, you replaced me. You were too much of a coward to break up with me, so you just waited for me to fly halfway across the world to find out for myself." "It's not like that," he yelled, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked small. "I love you. Things got complicated. The move was hard and Zara was there. And she's the one who's going to help you get that managing director role, right?" I stepped toward him, my heart pounding, but not with fear, with the weight of the secret I'd been carrying. "The local consultant you mentioned? The one the board was looking for to help with the branding?" Jake froze. "How do you know about the board's requirements?" "Because, Jake," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face, "I'm not just here for a holiday, and I'm certainly not here to be your secret girlfriend while Zara plays house in the kitchen she organized." All right, if you've made it this far, you know what's coming. Hit that like button if your team She Deserved Her Revenge. Now, let me tell you what I did next. Jake looked at me like I'd just started speaking a foreign language. He actually had the audacity to look confused, his mouth hanging open slightly as he stood in the middle of the perfect living room Zara had built for him. "What are you talking about, Liz? You're here for our vacation. You're here to see me." "No, Jake. I was here to see us," I said, my voice steady, dangerously calm. I walked over to the midnight velvet sofa and sat down, crossing my legs. I felt more at home in that moment than I had since I landed, mostly because I knew I was about to set the whole room on fire. "But us doesn't exist. You killed us months ago. You just forgot to send the death certificate." I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. The sleek silver casing felt like a shield. "You've been so worried about this managing director role," I continued, opening the lid, talking about how it was down to 2 candidates, you, the local hero, and some senior hire the board was flying in from the UK to oversee the branding and the culture shift. Jake's face went from flushed to a sickly, translucent white. How do you know the internal shortlist? That's confidential, Liz. If you've been hacking into my... I didn't have to hack anything, Jake. I was CC'd. I turned the screen around. There it was. An official offer letter from his own CEO dated 3 days ago. My name, Melissa Thorne, was at the top in bold, uncompromising black ink. "The London firm didn't just send me for a holiday," I said, each word a hammer blow. "They've been consulting with your Melbourne branch for months on this expansion. When your CEO reached out asking for a heavy hitter who knew the London brand but could handle the Australian market, my boss put my name forward. They wanted a woman's perspective because, and I quote, 'the current local leadership lacks emotional intelligence and focus.'" I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "He was talking about you, Jake. He was talking about how you've been distracted lately, how your work has become sloppy, derivative. He mentioned you seemed more interested in long lunches with the creative lead than in hitting your KPIs." Jake staggered back, his hand hitting the marble coffee table. You're taking my job? You're the senior hire? Liz, you can't do this. We're a couple. You're supposed to support me." "Support you?" I laughed, and it was the most honest sound I'd made in years. "I supported you for 5 years. I supported you through 7 a.m. wake-up calls and lonely nights in a flat that smelled like you. I supported you while you were busy letting Zara label your oats. You didn't want a partner, Jake. You wanted a placeholder. You wanted me to stay in London like a trophy on a shelf until you decided if your new life was better. Liz, please, he stammered, his voice cracking. I can fix this. I'll tell Zara it's over. I'll clear out the kitchen. We can move into a new place, start fresh. With what money? I asked, tilting my head. The MD role comes with the relocation package, the housing allowance, and the equity. The local candidate, the runner-up, is being kept on as a junior manager, reporting to me. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched his brain try to process the math. He had spent months playing two women against each other, feeling like the king of his own little world, and in 10 minutes, he had lost the girl, the title, and the power. You're a monster, he whispered. No, I said, standing up and closing my laptop with a definitive snap. I'm the director. And you? You're a man who needs to find a new place to live, because this apartment is part of the corporate housing package for the MD. My package. I walked toward the hallway, passing the kitchen where the Jakey's Morning Oats jar sat. I picked it up, looked at the loopy, elegant handwriting, and then simply let it drop. It shattered on the floor, glass and organic grains exploding across the pristine tile. Oops, I said, not looking back. Guess I'll have to reorganize. I spent the next hour packing. Not my vacation clothes. I packed everything. Jake stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching me with a mixture of horror and desperation. He tried to touch my arm, tried to pull the squeak card one last time, but I looked at him like he was a smudge on my windshield. Liz, don't do this. I love you. I stopped, suitcase zipped, and looked at him. Truly looked at him. I love me too, Jake. And unlike you, I'm actually worth the commitment. I called an Uber. I didn't wait for him to loosen his grip this time, because there was no grip left. He was a shell. A tanned, linen-wearing shell of a man who had traded a diamond for a curated succulents collection. As the car pulled away toward the airport, the same airport I'd arrived at only 48 hours ago, I didn't cry. I felt a strange, electric hum in my veins. The fire of my ambition hadn't just kept me warm in London. It had forged me into something he couldn't break. He thought he was the one moving up in the world. He forgot that while he was playing house, I was playing for keeps. Back in London, the rain was a relentless drumbeat against my window. But for the first time in years, the gray didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a clean slate. I didn't crawl into bed or mourn the 5 years I'd lost. You don't lose time when you learn exactly what you're capable of surviving. Instead, I spent the evening packing. Real packing. Silk dresses that commanded respect, tailored blazers that fit like armor, and the few mementos of my life that actually belonged to me. I came across the bottle of wine from the Yarra Valley, the one he'd inscribed with that nauseatingly sweet note. To my squeak, my heart's finest wine. I carried it to the kitchen. I didn't reach for a glass. I didn't look for a corkscrew. I grabbed a heavy rolling pin and smashed the neck of the bottle over the sink. The red liquid sprayed across the white porcelain, looking exactly like the blood of a dead relationship. I watched it swirl down the drain, thick and staining, until every drop of his heart's finest was gone. My phone buzzed on the counter, a flurry of desperate, pathetic texts from Jake. Liz, please talk to me. Zara's moving out. The board is asking questions. Then, a final email from the CEO. The contract was finalized. My flight was booked for Monday. Business class. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. My glow wasn't from the Australian sun I'd left behind. It was from the fire of my own ambition. I wasn't just moving to a new city. I was moving into a new version of myself, one that didn't answer to squeak and didn't let anyone else label her life. I picked up my phone and did the most satisfying thing of all. I blocked him. I blocked Zara. I cleared the digital ghosts from my machine. 3 months later, the view from my office in Melbourne is spectacular. From the 42nd floor, the Yarra River looks like a silver thread, and the city I once feared would swallow my relationship now belongs to me. I moved into the apartment. My apartment. The first thing I did was replace that marble coffee table with a custom-built oak piece I picked out myself. There are no ceramic birds. There are no loopy labels. There is just space, and a lot of it. Jake still works here, technically. He's a junior manager now, 3 levels below me. He spends his days in a cubicle, avoiding my gaze in the elevator and jumpily checking his emails. He looks older, tired, the tan fading under the fluorescent office lights. He lost the girl, the promotion, and the respect of the board. As for me, I've never been better. My life is honest, successful, and entirely mine. So that's my story. Do you think I was right to take his job, or did I go too far? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories about women who refuse to stay down, hit that subscribe button.